The storm clawed at Manhattan like a living thing, rain slashing the windows of St. Augustine Hospital with relentless fury. Thunder rumbled deep, and lightning tore the sky apart, casting jagged flashes into the ICU's cold, sterile glow. Olivia Liv Grayson lay motionless on a bed, her face pale as chalk, dark hair splayed wild against the white pillow. She wasn't just a patient, she was the tech titan who'd once stood before a sea of suits and vowed, "I'll burn it all down if I have to." That was 6 months ago. Now she was a shell, locked in a coma after a crash no one could explain. Aiden Carter stood at her side, his lean frame taut, black eyes glinting with a restless edge. At 28, he was a doctor forged in fire-scarred knuckles from punching out a car window to save a kid 2 years back, booted from his last gig for calling out a drug scam. His white coat hung loose over a wrinkled shirt, a battered notebook stuffed in his pocket, scribbled with doubts. Tonight, he jotted, Liv Grayson bandages off, breathing restricted. His fingers brushed the yellowed gauze on her chest, then froze. A tiny red pinprick gleamed beneath the edge, fresh, deliberate, not in any chart. His pulse kicked hard, hands trembling as he grabbed sterile scissors. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, voice rough with sleepless grit. The door banged open before he could cut. "Carter, stop right now." Margaret, the head nurse, stormed in, gray hair pulled tight, her voice a whip over the storm. "You're breaking every rule, step back." Aiden spun, eyes blazing. "Rules? Look at this." He jabbed at the pinprick, then the tight gauze. "She's choking under this crap, someone's hiding something. And I'm not waiting for your damn permission." He sliced through the fabric, ignoring Margaret's lunge to grab his arm. Red welts striped Liv's skin where the bandages had bitten deep. Margaret's radio crackled as she barked, "I'm calling security now." But then it happened. The heart monitor screeched, numbers spiking wild. 60, 70, 80. Liv's chest shuddered, a faint jolt rippling through her. Her eyelids fluttered, and those deep brown eyes snapped open, locking onto Aiden with a fierceness that stole his breath. The scissors slipped from his shaking grip, clattering to the floor. Holy Margaret choked, her clipboard crashing down. "This isn't possible," she stammered, fumbling the radio. Liv was awake, impossibly, defiantly alive. Aiden's heart pounded as he leaned closer, her gaze pinning him like a blade. Margaret bolted, spitting, "You're finished, Carter!" Over her shoulder, the door slamming behind her. He barely heard it. His voice dropped to a raw whisper, thick with shock. "You know something, don't you?" Outside, the storm howled, but in that flickering green light, a different war had just ignited. The ICU sank into a brittle silence after Liv's eyes snapped open. The heart monitor's frantic beeps echoing, the storm's fading roar outside. Aiden stood frozen, his breath shallow, the scissors still trembling in his hand from cutting her bandages moments ago. Liv's deep brown gaze held him, wild, and heavy with unspoken weight, answering his whispered question. "You know something, don't you?" Without a word. The door slammed from Margaret's exit still rang in his ears. Her threat. "You're finished, Carter." Live wire sparking in the air. He dropped the scissors, the clatter sharp against the tile, and dragged a chair close, its legs scraping loud in the hush. "Can you hear me?" he asked, voice low, rough from too many sleepless nights. Her eyes flickered, one slow blink. "Yes." His throat tightened, the pinprick on her chest flashing in his mind a deliberate mark, not a fluke. Was that crash an accident? 2 blinks. No. A chill snaked down his spine, tying her awakening to something darker than he'd guessed. "Okay," he murmured, leaning in until their faces were inches apart. "We're in this now. Together." Her gaze softened, a faint trust breaking through, and he felt it hook him deep, her silent plea, pulling him into a fight he hadn't signed up for but couldn't walk away from. Morning crept in with a gray drizzle, the city outside St. Augustine blurred in fog. Aiden found a red notice taped to his locker. "Disciplinary review, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Misconduct reported." Margaret hadn't wasted a second snitching to the board after he'd defied her in the ICU. He crumpled the paper, shoving it into his pocket, jaw clenched tight. Losing his job was a punch he could take. What he couldn't shake was that tiny red mark on Liv's skin, screaming sabotage. Her 2 blinks, no echoed in his head, a drumbeat driving him forward. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. He slipped into the hospital lab after hours, sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, the fluorescent buzz overhead grating his nerves. Jake, a wiry lab tech with a buzz cut and a permanent coffee stain on his shirt, slumped over a counter. He owed Aiden from a bar fight 2 years back. Aiden had yanked him out before the fists turned to cuffs. "This better be good, man," Jake grumbled, rubbing sleep from his eyes as Aiden slid a vial of Liv's blood in the unmarked bottle from the supply room across the scratched steel. "Test these," Aiden said, voice clipped. "Off the books. Sedatives, toxins, anything weird. And hurry." Jake squinted, swirling the clear liquid in the vial. "You're nuts, Carter. This some ICU hunch?" Aiden stared didn't waver. "Just do it." Jake sighed, nodding. "Fine. You owe me a case of beer." Back in the ICU, Aiden rigged a lifeline with Liv. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Pain? 2 blinks. Tired? 1 blink. He swabbed her cracked lips with water, his fingers steady despite the adrenaline buzzing through him. "Hang on," he said, voice softening. "You're tougher than this hellhole." Her eyes flickered, a ghost of a smile tugging at her mouth. He stayed late, perched on that rickety chair, talking to keep her grounded, how he'd stitched up a stray mutt in his apartment with fishing line, how he'd bombed his first med school exam and laughed it off over a warm Bud Light. Her lips twitched again, a faint curve. It was small, but it lit something fierce in him, tying her fragile fight to his growing resolve. 2 days later, Jake caught Aiden in the cafeteria, cornering him by the vending machine with a styrofoam cup shaking in his hand. "Low-dose anesthetic," he hissed, eyes darting like a hunted man's. "Both samples blood and that vial. Enough to keep someone under for months without tripping alarms." "Where'd you get this crap, Aiden?" Aiden's stomach lurched, coffee turning bitter on his tongue. "Found it where it shouldn't be," he said, voice tight. "Keep it quiet, Jake." He walked away, mind racing. Someone had drugged Liv calculated, cold as ice. Her no from the night before clicked into place. Not an accident, but a hit. His gut pointed to Daniel Grayson, Liv's younger brother. At 30, the guy was slick-tailored suits, a smile that could sell sand in a desert. After Liv's crash, he'd slid into her CEO chair at Grayson Tech like he'd been born for it, spinning tales of stability to a drooling board. Aiden had seen him on the news, all polish and charm, but the hospital logs told a dirtier story. Daniel visited Liv late, always alone, slipping through like a ghost. Too clean, too damn convenient. That night, Aiden replayed the security footage he'd swiped from the guard's office. A lie about checking a log glitch still bitter on his tongue. The screen flickered AM 3 months back. Daniel, in a dark trench coat, handing a vial to a jittery nurse. Jenny, the quiet one on Liv's shift. Daniel clapped her shoulder, his grin cold, a deal sealed in shadows. Aiden's blood ran hot. He'd seen that vial before, half empty in the supply room, now confirmed as poison. He tracked Jenny down at midnight, catching her in the break room as she nursed a stale coffee. He shut the door, recorder hidden in his sleeve, and leaned in close, voice a low growl. "Talk." She shrank back, coffee splashing onto the table, hands quaking as she gripped the cup. "I didn't want a Daniel shove 10 grand at me, said to inject her or head destroy my kids." Her voice splintered, eyes darting like a trapped animal's. "He said it'd just calm her. That she'd wake up soon. I didn't know it'd trap her like that." Tears streaked her face, her sob choking the air. Aiden stopped the recording, adrenaline roaring in his chest. Video confession, Viasel had Daniel pinned, but the clock was ticking. Margaret's report loomed, and the board was out for his head. He stared at the crumpled red notice in his pocket, a flicker of doubt hitting hard. Was Liv worth this? His career, his life, torched for a woman he barely knew? Then he saw her eyes in his mind, those 2 blinks, that faint smile, and the doubt burned away. "Damn it," he muttered, shoving the paper back. "She's worth it." Morning broke heavy, the hospital buzzing with whispers of his defiance in the ICU. A second notice hit his locker. Immediate suspension pending review. Margaret had doubled down, and the board was closing in. He tore it up, hands shaking with fury. They could take his badge. He didn't care. What he couldn't lose was Liv. Not after her, no had dragged him this far. He stormed back to the ICU, dodging nurses' stares, and locked the door behind him. Liv lay there, her eyes sharper now, cutting through the haze. He pulled the chair close, the vial clinking in his pocket as he sat. "I've got him," he said, voice rough with resolve. "Daniel's done, he'll bury him with this." Her hand twitched, fingers brushing his, weak but fierce, like she was anchoring him too. Good, she blinked once, her trust a silent tether pulling them tighter. He didn't sleep that night, the red notices piling up in his head. His notebook lay open, scribbled with one line: "Protect her, and this." Across town, Daniel paced a dimly lit office, phone pressed to his ear. "Carter's digging too deep," he snarled, voice low and venomous. "Shut him down permanently. Tonight." The line clicked dead, and a cold smile curled his lips as he lit a cigarette, the flame dancing in the dark. The ICU pulsed with a tense hum that night, the air thick with the drone of machines and the faint sting of antiseptic cutting through the damp chill left by the storm. Aiden sat hunched by Liv's bed, the vial of anesthetic a cold weight in his pocket, his notebook splayed open on his lap with that scrawled vow: "Protect her, and this." Liv's eyes sharp now, piercing through 6 months of haze-tracked him, her silent trust from the night before still burning in his chest. Shed blinked, good when he'd promised to bury Daniel, her fingers brushing his like a lifeline. The board's suspension loomed at dawn, but it was Daniel's hit order, shut him down permanently, that kept Aiden's nerves on a razor's edge. He leaned in, voice a low growl. "I've got him video, vial, Jenny's confession. He's not slipping this." Liv's hand twitched again, her cool skin grazing his, her chest straining against the ventilator. Then, in a sudden, ragged surge, she gripped the tube and yanked it free. Aiden jolted upright, chair scraping back. "Liv, no!" But she was already coughing, a harsh, wet rasp tearing through her, her voice clawing out. "Daniel," she croaked, each word a jagged shard. "He wants me dead." Her eyes locked onto his, wild with pain and fury, and Aiden's world tilted. He snatched a sterile towel, pressing it to her mouth as she wheezed, hands shaking. "Easy, don't push it." The door rattled, someone pounding hard. "Carter, open this damn door!" Margaret's voice sliced through, shrill and venomous. Aiden spun, slamming his shoulder against the frame. "Not now," he roared. The pounding intensified, her shouts muffled. "Security, now!" But he turned back to Liv, heart hammering. "Talk. What happened?" She swallowed, her voice a broken whisper. "I faked it, the coma. To stop him." Aiden froze, towel slipping from his grip. "What?" Liv's eyes burned, unyielding. "I caught him signing a deal selling my code to crash markets. He hired someone to ram my car off the road. I injected the drug myself, low dose, to vanish, to get proof, but it..." She coughed, a tear streaking her cheek. "It went wrong, too strong." Aiden's mind reeled, fury crashing over him like a wave. "You used me?" he snapped, voice rising, raw and jagged. "I've been torching my life, my job? Everything while you played dead?" Liv's gaze didn't flinch, but her voice cracked. "I had no choice, Aiden. He'd have killed me outright if I stayed awake. I saw him sign away my life's work, billions gone. But you..." She gripped his arm, trembling. "You fought when I couldn't. You changed it." He yanked free, fists clenched, pacing a tight circle. "Changed it? I was your damn alarm clock." His chest heaved, betrayal clawing at him. She'd turned him into a pawner wake-up call, her shield. "I trusted you," he spat, voice breaking. Liv pushed up, wincing, her hair spilling wild. "And I trust you now. I was ready to die. Then you cut those bandages. You gave me a reason to live." Before he could fire back, the door burst open. Margaret stormed in, flanked by 2 security guards in black, their radios crackling. "You're done, Carter," she shouted, pointing at Liv. "What the hell did you do to her?" Aiden wheeled on her, stepping in front of Liv's bed. "Back off. She's awake because I stopped your bullshit negligence." A guard grabbed his arm, but he shoved back hard. "Get off him, not the enemy here." Liv's voice cut through, weak but sharp as steel. "No." She gripped the bed rail, hauling herself up, dark hair framing a face carved with defiance. "He stays. I need him." The guards faltered, glancing at Margaret, who sputtered, "She's delirious, ignore her." But Liv's glare silenced the room. "I'm Olivia Grayson. You don't tell me who stays." Her words landed like a gavel, and Margaret backed off, muttering threats, the guards trailing her out in a huff. Aiden exhaled, adrenaline still buzzing, and turned to Liv. "You're insane," he said, half laughing, half furious, wiping sweat from his brow. "But we're not done. Daniel's next." She nodded, a flicker of steel in her eyes. "Take him down. For me." He met her gaze, the fight still simmering, but her pleurall real-tied them tighter. "For us," he corrected, voice firm. Dawn bled gray over St. Augustine, the hospital buzzing with rumors of Liv's voice breaking the silence. Aiden gathered his arsenal, the security footage, Jenny's taped confession, the vial in a plastic bag. The disciplinary hearing was an hour away, but he had a bigger target. He strode to the executive wing, the manila folder under his arm a live grenade, his sneakers pounding the linoleum. Nurses whispered, Liv's awakening, his suspension fueling the chaos. The boardroom doors loomed, glass and steel, a fortress of suits. Inside, Daniel Grayson lounged at the head of a polished table, his suit crisp, coffee cup dangling in his hand. The hospital brass flanked him, tight smiles masking their clauses, with Margaret smirking by the wall. Aiden didn't knock, he shoved the doors open, the bang ringing like a shot. Head snapped up, Daniel's smirk twitching. "Dr. Carter," he drawled, setting the cup down. "Begging for mercy?" Aiden slammed the folder down, papers spilling stills of Daniel with the vial, Jenny's words in black ink. "No," he said, voice low and furious. "I'm here to bury you." The room buzzed, suits shifting. He jabbed the photos, security footage 3 months ago. "You paid Jenny to drug your sister, keep her down so you could steal Grayson Tech. She talked 10 grand to dope Liv up. Ring a bell?" Daniel leaned back, arms crossed, unruffled. "Cute story, doctor. But you're out of your depth. One call, and you're ash." His smile was a blade. Aiden stepped closer, voice a growl. "Try it. I've got copy stapes, files, witnesses." "You're done." Daniel shot to his feet, towering over him, voice a hiss. "You're a dead man, Carter. She's my sister, my company. You'll bleed for this, and he'll watch." Silent stretch, taut as a wire. Daniel's jaw twitched, eyes flicking to the papers, then back to Aiden. He sneered, snatching his coat. "Enjoy your war," he spat, brushing past. "It won't last." The doors slammed, leaving Aiden amid stunned suits. He gathered the evidence, adrenaline surging. He'd rattled Daniel, bought Liv a shot, but the fight wasn't over. He raced back to the ICU, the folder a weapon in his grip. Liv sat propped up, oxygen tubes whispering, her breathing steadier. She looked up, eyes locking his. "Did you get him?" she rasped. Aiden nodded, pulling the chair close. "He's shaken." "We've got him cornered." Her lips curved, a faint, fierce smile. "Good." But her gaze darkened. Hell hit back hard. Aiden leaned in, hand brushing hers, iron in his voice. "Let him try. I'm not going anywhere." He'd texted Torres, an old med school buddy at the FBI, hours ago insurance if Daniel struck. Outside, the hospital hummed with chaos. But across town, Daniel climbed into a black SUV, phone to his ear. "They've got too much," he snarled. "End it tonight, both of them." The line clicked dead, his cold smile glinting in the dark. The ICU settled into a tense hush that night. The damp chill from the storm long faded, leaving only the steady hum of machines and the faint glow of green lights. Aiden sat by Liv's bed, shoulders slumped, the manila folder of evidence tucked under the mattress like a loaded gun. Liv lay propped against pillows, oxygen tubes whispering into her nose, her dark hair spilling wild over her shoulders. Her breathing was steadier, but her brown eyes, fierce, alive, tracked him with a restless edge, echoing their pact from hours ago. "I'm not going anywhere." Daniel's snarled threat, "End it tonight," both of them, hung heavy, a guillotine waiting to drop. Aiden rubbed his bruised knuckles, voice low. "He's coming for us." I rattled him too hard. Liv's fingers tightened on the blanket, her voice raspy but firm. "He won't stop. Not until I'm gone." She reached for his hand, her grip weak but deliberate, tying them tighter after their fight in the ICU. "You're still here," she said, a faint crack in her steel. He met her gaze, jaw tight. "Told you I'm in this." The lights flickered a sharp, stuttering buzz slicing the quiet. Aiden's head snapped up, instincts screaming. The door creaked, a shadow stretching long across the tile. He stood, shoving the folder deeper under the bed, just as Liv's grip clamped his wrist. Aiden, her warning drowned in the crash of the door slamming open. A hulking figure in a black hoodie burst in, a syringe glinting in his fist, clear liquid dripping from the needle. Aiden didn't hesitate. He threw himself at the guy, slamming him into the wall with a bone-jarring thud. The syringe skittered across the floor, but the thug swung a meaty fist, clipping Aiden's jaw. Blood flooded his mouth, pain flaring hot, but he ducked the next blow, driving his elbow into the man's gut. "Liv, stay back!" he shouted, voice ragged. She didn't. Liv ripped the oxygen tubes free, staggering out of bed, bare feet slapping the tile. She grabbed the metal IV stand, swinging it hard. The pole cracked across the thug's skull, a sickening crunch echoing as he stumbled. Aiden pinned his arm, twisting until the guy snarled. But the thug broke free, lunging with a wild roar. A second syringe flashed in his hand, same clear liquid, same death. Aiden tackled him again, slamming his wrist to the floor, but the needle grazed his arm, a sharp sting cutting through. He grunted, vision blurring, and smashed the guy's head down, knocking him cold. Blood streaked the tile, pooling under the thug's limp form. Panting, Aiden staggered up, clutching his arm. "Who sent you?" he snarled, kicking the second syringe away. The thug groaned, spitting red through broken teeth. "Grayson says hi, Daniel." Rage burned white hot, but Liv's voice cut through, sharp and cold. "Wait!" She stumbled closer, clutching the bed rail, her eyes fixed on the syringe. She yanked her gown aside, revealing a faint scar under her ribs. "It's in May your cut, woke it." Aiden blinked, blood dripping from his lip. "What?" Liv's face hardened, a shadow of the Titan shed bin. "A tracker my design. Microchip and fluid. Daniel's selling it military buyers, foreign cash. I hid the prototype in me, coded to my pulse. When you cut those bandages." Her voice faltered, eyes glistening. "You triggered it. Saved me." The room spun. That pinprick, her awakening, it wasn't just drugs. She'd made herself a vault, a weapon, and had tripped the switch. "You're saying I flip a damn spy chip?" he snapped, half stunned, half furious. She nodded, trembling. "I thought I'd die with it. Then you fought for me." Her words sank in, raw and unguarded, and the sting in his arm faded under her gaze. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Security finally roused by the chaos. Aiden kicked the syringes under the bed, pulling Liv behind him as guards stormed in, radios crackling. "What the hell happened?" one barked, eyeing the thug's crumpled body. Aiden spat blood, grinning darkly. "Patient defense. Call the cops as a hitman." The guards hauled this guy out, cuffs snapping on, but Liv's grip on Aiden's shirt didn't loosen. She sank onto the bed, spent, and whispered, "There's an SS under my skin. Proof of Daniel's deals. Get it to Torres." Aiden stared, then nodded, jaw tight. "We end this. Together." He'd texted Torres, an FBI buddy from med school after the boardroom, a lifeline now paying off. Hours later, dawn bled red over Manhattan, the city waking to sirens. Aiden sat in a cramped hospital office, Liv beside him, a surgical bandage on her chest where a nurse had dug out the SSDA tiny drive crusted with blood. Torres arrived in a black sedan, taking it with a gruff, "This better be gold, Carter." By noon, it broke. Daniel Grayson nabbed at JFK, a suitcase of cash in hand, his smug face cuffed and snarling on every newsfeed. The SSD cracked his empire, emails, contracts, proof he'd sold Liv's trackers to rogue militaries for billions. Grayson Tech imploded, the board scattering like rats. Aiden leaned against the ICU wall, jaw bruised, arm bandaged from the graze. Liv emerged, hospital gown swapped for a borrowed sweater, her steps shaky but sure. She stopped beside him, hand brushing his. "You didn't have to take that hit," she said, voice soft but firm. He turned, meeting her eyes, a tired grin tugging his lips. "Yeah, I did. You're worth it." She didn't reply, just leaned into him, head on his shoulder, the weight of their war settling between them. Sirens wailed outside, but here it was just them, two survivors bound by blood and fire. Weeks after the chaos of that blood-streaked night in the ICU, Aiden Carter and Liv Grayson traded Manhattan's glaring lights for the quiet grid of Queens. The sun dipped low over their new home, a modest brownstone with a patchy lawn and a sagging fence, casting a warm glow across the cracked sidewalk. Aiden leaned against the porch railing, a cold beer in hand, The faint throb in his bandaged arm, a fading echo of the syringe graze he'd taken for Liv. At 28, he carried new scars knuckles raw, a line across his jaw, but his black eyes still burned with that stubborn fire. Zet. Augustine had lifted his suspension after Daniel's arrest, but he'd walked away. His fight wasn't in sterile halls anymore. Liv stepped out, the screen door creaking shut behind her. 3 months since she had ripped those oxygen tubes free, her skin glowed warm again, her dark hair loose and catching the light. At 3, she wore a simple sweater and jeans, no trace of the billionaire who'd once ruled Grayson Tech. Her hands still trembled, faintly ghosts of atrophy, but she moved with a quiet strength, a chipped mug of tea steaming in her grip. She settled beside him, shoulder brushing his, the weight of their shared survival settling like dust after a storm. A block away, the Carter Grayson Clinic stood a squat brick building with a hand-painted sign, its doors flung wide that morning for flu season's rush. Aiden had patched up a kid's scraped knee earlier, the boy grinning through tears as he'd slapped on a Batman Band-Aid. Liv had charmed a local donor into footing the electric bill, her steel-edged charm bent toward kindness now. It was his dream from med school, a place where no one got turned away made real by her sharp mind and their shared grit. Worth it? Aiden asked, voice low, glancing at her over the beer's rim. Liv's lips curved, a small, fierce smile breaking through. Every second, she slid her hand into his, fingers lacing through his calloused ones, rough from stitching wounds and throwing punches. We did this together. He squeezed back, a slow grin spreading. Yeah, we did. Shed dismantled Grayson Tech after Daniel's fall, signing away billions with a stolen hospital pen while Aiden watched, pride swelling in his chest. The money poured into charity schools in the Bronx, shelters for women like her, clinics for the overlooked. Tabloids screamed Tech Queen goes bust, but Shed laughed, a throaty sound that lit him up. Freedom's worth more than gold, Shed said, and had nodded, believing every word. They'd kept enough for this a roof. A purpose, not the penthouses or private jets Shed once owned. The last patient had left hours ago, leaving the street quiet save for kids kicking a soccer ball down the block. Aiden took a swig, the cold biting his throat, and watched them chase it, their shouts a distant hum. Never figured I'd land here, he said half to himself. Liv tilted her head, tea steaming in her hands. Queens? He chuckled, shaking his head. No, with you. Building this. She set the mug down, turning to face him, her eyes locking onto his, deep brown, steady, the same eyes that had pierced him awake in the ICU. You gave me that, Aiden, she said, voice soft but weighted. I was dead inside before the Coma loan, betrayed, chasing a throne I hated. You pulled me back. A tear glinted, but she held his gaze, unyielding. Aiden set the bottle on the railing, his hand finding hers again, thumb tracing her knuckles. You're not the only one who got pulled, he said, voice rough with emotion he rarely let slip. I was a burned-out doc, pissed at everything, running on empty. You gave me a fight worth winning. Her eyes softened, and he felt it, the tether forged in blood and fire, stronger now than ever. The horizon stretched wide, the last light fading over the row houses, casting shadows across the Clinica beacon born from their war. Earlier, he'd caught the kid with the Band-Aid waving from the sidewalk, a small victory in a sea of need. The storms that once raged around them, rain hammering windows, blades glinting in the dark, were gone, but their fire, forged through betrayal and sacrifice, burned brighter than ever. Liv leaned into him, her head resting against his chest, breath warm through his shirt. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close, her heartbeat syncing with his, a rhythm they'd fought to keep alive. Ready for tomorrow, he murmured into her hair, the scent of tea and her grounding him. She nodded against him, voice a quiet vow. With you, I'm ready for anything. Stars pricked the sky, a breeze rustling the patchy grass. The city's roar faded to a lullaby. But here, it was just them, two souls who'd clawed through hell and built something real. The clinic glowed softly, its name a testament, Carter Grayson. They'd turned a forgotten street into a lifeline, hand in hand. Aiden tilted her chin up, his grin softening into something truer. We're a hell of a team, Grayson. She laughed low, throaty, alive, and pressed her lips to his, brief but fierce. Always, Carter. They stood tangled together as night fell, the golden haze giving way to silver. Love had carried them here, past storms, past blades, past every lie, and it would carry them forward, a flame no darkness could snuff out. What's the takeaway from Aiden and Liv's wild ride? It's simple but hits hard. Courage and trust can light a fire even in the darkest storms. Aiden, a scrappy doctor with nothing to lose, and Liv, a titan hiding a world-changing secret, didn't just survive, they turned betrayal and chaos into something real, something lasting. Their story proves love isn't glitter and gold. It's the grit to stand up, fight back, and build a better tomorrow, one scar at a time. From a stormy ICU to a Queen's clinic, they showed us that heroes don't need capes, just a heartbeat and a hell of a lot of guts. Love this journey? Smash that like button and hit subscribe for more soul-stirring stories that grab you by the heart and don't let go. Join us next, tales just around the corner.